Joining us on episode 5 of the Off the Air podcast is a Fordham alum, WFUV alum, class of 2005, and the host of You Better You Bet on radio.com sports. It's Nick Kostos. Nick, thanks for being with us.
What's going on, guys? Always great to be on with the great people of WFUV sports. You know, some of the fondest times of my life spent at Fordham and WFUV. And I will add also sports manager of WFUV back in my senior year, all the way back in 2004 to 2005. Just had to throw that in there. Great to be on with you guys.
There you go. So recently with the pandemic, a lot has changed in the industry and the radio industry at that. So how have you been adapting to the new normal?
I work from home really, so it hasn't been like a tremendous change for me as far as like logistics go. But I mean, look, obviously with no sports, it obviously became difficult. And, pretty much every facet of this industry, whether it's radio, whether it's television, digital, linear, everything's been hit by this. So we were off for a couple of weeks, like while we waited for sports to come back. So like, it was kind of like, it sucked because I am a huge sports fan and like, I like to gamble on sports also. And like, this is my job. But I mean, I grew up I've been a diehard sports fan my entire life. So I think the adjustment not only was just from a working perspective, and obviously great to be back doing the show again, but also just from a life perspective, like aside from just how life changed because of the virus with social distancing and everything and like the quarantine, a major change for me was it's like, wow, I've got all this time now. And I usually had spent this time, watching sports. And now I've got all this free time here and like, okay, like it's kind of cool being like, okay, like I can read some books I wanted to read, or I can watch movies I had never watched, or catch up on TV shows, or binge like Tiger King on Netflix, whatever's big there. But truth be told, like I want to watch the NBA. I want to watch baseball. I wanted to watch March Madness. So major void in my life without sports. And now that we've got golf back and we've got soccer back, and now that we're in July and later this month, we're going to have baseball, God willing, and basketball, the NBA. It feels like we're starting to get a little bit of normalcy back. So it's definitely made me a lot happier.
Nick, you mentioned a lot of free time. And like you mentioned, so many of us big sports fans were struggling with what to exactly do during that time. What were some of the things that kept you busy during this weird quarantine that we went through for almost 2 months?
Well, I moved, and I think if you were to like construct a list of like worst times to move, I think maybe like pandemic would be at top of the list during a global pandemic. So I moved during a global pandemic, which was fun. Like literally, like I made like all the movers and me, like we were all like basically wearing hazmat suits when I moved. So I moved in with my girlfriend. So that's been an adjustment. Never lived with a girl before. 37 years old, just turned 37 last month.
Congrats.
So thank you very much. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, 37 years old now, living with someone for the first time, with a girl for the first time, has been interesting. So really trying to keep my relationship afloat. And now that sports are back, trying to keep my relationship afloat. Now that I'm watching sports on TV all day again, watching soccer and golf has been interesting. I can give you like a real like vanity answer here. Like I've been working out more. Who cares about that kind of stuff though? I guess really the big thing has really been just like, has been the move for me, living in a new place, living with my girlfriend now, and kind of all the difficulties and challenges kind of that come with something like that. And been reading more and watching, like catching up on movies and that I've always, I don't know if we can curse on this, movies and stuff that I've always wanted to see. So yeah, that's really been it.
So you talked about the void of sports over the last couple of months, and there seems to be some renewed skepticism with the return of baseball and some of the leagues because of some players opting out, not being sure about the health aspect. Are you a little skeptical that there could be some major obstacles once sports returns?
Well, I think anyone that's like not skeptical about that would be lying. Like you have to be skeptical about it. Like even the most optimistic person, and I would consider myself to be a pretty optimistic person, I think there has to be some skepticism, but like I can't feed into that for many different reasons. And like, I'm not looking to politicize this and I'm not going to do that here, but just from my perspective here, like I personally, not just for like my income and for my job, I need sports. Like I love sports. Like I have to have it. And I'm operating under the assumption here. And some people will kind of criticize Adam Silver in the NBA or baseball or football. Like, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like, how could you try and play sports? How about because like the country loves it? Like, how about that for a reason? How about selfishly for me, because I would like to continue to get my nice paycheck every month. Like, how about that? Like, those are all reasons why I need to be optimistic about there being sports. And I think kind of the line being struck last week by two different commissioners made me feel good. PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan, and then on Friday, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, both repeated a very similar mantra, which I think we'll hear Roger Goodell say, and Rob Manfred might be too stupid enough to come out with this on his own, but we're going to have to learn to live with this virus. Like, I love that, like, people are surprised by, like, oh my God, like 2 players in the Pelicans organization tested positive. It's like, no, of course people are going to test positive. Like, this is how it's going to go. And everyone knows that. So I'm not letting positive tests right now, like, make me negative about sports coming back. I have to think that, like, there are going to be contingency plans for all this stuff. So I'm optimistic that we're going to get team sports. I'm optimistic the NBA will finish. I'm optimistic that we'll get an NFL season. I feel less good about college sports, but I think we'll get the NBA. I think we'll get baseball. I think we'll get the NFL.
Nick, let's talk about your career a little bit. You are obviously in the sports gambling industry when it comes to media. Was that something that was always on your mind? Was that always the path you wanted to take, or is that something that kind of developed maybe after college as you got into the real world in this industry?
So it's a great question, Jackson. And like, I started gambling on sports my senior year. So 2004 to 2005. And I remember, like, I lost like my first 11 bets, like literally, like I could not like win a bet to save my life, but like I kind of like really loved it. And it was kind of like, and I think that this is kind of the appeal for a lot of sports bettors is we're sports fans first and foremost. Now you have like a lot of like financial investors, right? Like math people that gamble on sports the way like you gamble on the stock market, who just basically look at a spreadsheet. They may not even watch the games. They're looking for a mathematical edge. But I think that kind of the appeal of sports betting is we're all kind of experts to a degree. Like, we all watch sports. We've all been watching sports our entire lives. So it's an opportunity for us to say, well, I know what I'm talking about here, so I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. So it kind of held that appeal for me when I first started. And quite frankly, like, that's still kind of part of the fun of this. So when I was at Fordham, you know, I hosted one-on-one. That was always kind of my bag. I was really bad at play-by-play, you know, just as a quick aside. September 11th, 2004, I remember because it was 9/11. I did play-by-play for Fordham against Albany in Albany. And I remember I called Bob Aarons, the legendary Bob Aarons, afterwards. And I was like, Bob, I'm not going to ask you how I did. I'm just going to ask that you don't give me any more play-by-play assignments because I'm terrible. And I wanted Greg Giambarisi, who was a year younger than me, to start doing more play-by-play than me. So that was my great leadership that I showed. I was like, I shouldn't do this anymore because I suck. But I always really loved hosting when I was at school. And then when I graduated, I got opportunities to go do on-air stuff in smaller markets, Buffalo, Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I wanted to stay local. My family and friends are here. I was dating a girl at the time, so I didn't really want to move. So I started working at Sirius, then just Sirius Satellite Radio before they merged with XM. And I started doing off-air stuff, and I really liked that. So I started getting into producing on the NFL channel. And because of all the people that I knew in the NFL world, I got a couple opportunities to do some writing. Bleacher Report kind of picked me up. Like one of the guys there, Aaron Nagler, who people may be familiar with, is like a Packers themed reporter now, an analyst now, was the national writer for Bleacher Report at the time. Saw one of my articles, literally said, do you mind if I give it to my editor? I was like, great. The next day, I got offered a job by them, started writing about the NFL. And this was maybe 2012. And at the time, like even now, I would say big networks are only like kind of like maybe like knee deep in the sports gambling space, like still aren't even like waist deep, I would say. And then it was maybe like toenail deep at that point. So I actually, and I don't mean this to denigrate Bleacher Report because I feel like basically everyone kind of felt this way at the time. I kind of had to convince them to let me write like an NFL picks column because I was gambling every single weekend. And I'm like, I think people will like this. Like all my friends gamble on sports. Why wouldn't this do well? So they let me do it. And I started to gain notoriety doing that. And like I kind of noticed my following was growing in the sports gambling space. I would bet on games and kind of live sweat them and live tweet them. And I'm kind of an emotional guy. I'm an emo roller coaster. So people kind of dug that. And it was just kind of like a niche that I kind of found and kind of dove headfirst into because like the NFL is my love. Everyone loves the NFL though. Everyone has an opinion on the NFL. So I found sports gambling to be somewhere where I could kind of be, and this was never really my goal, but I think I've kind of become it. And I don't mean this arrogantly. I think that a lot of people will say this, kind of like an authority in the space where like, I don't think that would necessarily be the case if I had tried to be a straight NFL host. So there was a lot of opportunity at the time. And now that the space is exploding and I'm established in it already, I feel pretty good about the direction that it's taken me in.
To dive deeper into the Fordham and WFUV aspect of things, how much did it teach you in terms of adaptability and trying to find a niche maybe to stand out that you've carried into this new path of sports gambling?
I mean, infinite. When people ask me what I majored in college and I say accounting, which I did, I have an accounting degree from the Fordham College of Business Administration. Shout out to the Fordham CBA. People are always stunned. They're like, accounting degree, but like you're in the media. And I'm like, yeah, well, I didn't need, a journalism degree, a communications degree, because I worked at WFUV. Like I got real experience. I know I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know, but what an experience in college, like getting to cover the Giants and the Yankees and the Knicks and the Rangers and interviewing professional athletes. And we won my senior year New York State Broadcasting Award for the show that I hosted from the 2004 NFL Draft when the Giants traded for Eli Manning. Like we beat major sports radio stations as I hosted that show as a senior in college. And Emmanuel, I know, one of your mentors, Pat Reichart, who was my college roommate. We went to high school together and then went to Fordham together. He produced that show. And like for the two of us to do that was really cool. So I would say infinite. Like there's no words kind of for what the experience meant to me. And I think something that it taught me that I was able to take in through my career at Sirius and really helped me stand out, it really forced you to be good at everything. So like you start out and you're learning how to cut tape, and then you do updates, and you run the board, and you produce, and you host. So when I walked out of college, like I walked out with a skill set that like almost no one has walking out of college. So I can't overstate how critical and how unbelievable that experience was at WFUV, preparing me for a career in the media. And I'm not just saying that, like it legitimately did.
You mentioned the great Bob Aarons before in alluding to him never putting you on a play-by-play assignment again. How has he influenced your career, and how has he influenced the path that you've taken after graduating from Fordham? Infinite
influence. I think probably everyone that you'll talk to that's in my age range that worked with Bob will all say the same thing. He's one of the funniest people of all time, maybe unintentionally a lot of the time. Whenever we all get together, like everyone in my age group, and like we all maybe throw back a couple beers, the Bob impersonations start flowing, but they're out of love. Like it's always laughing with him, never laughing at him. He was just an unbelievable guy, absolutely hilarious, an unbelievable mind for the business. And really, I think the number one thing that he kind of taught me, I'm going to try and get the line right, but it was, you're never as good as, maybe if you guys have heard of it, you're never as good as you think you are, but you're never as bad as you think I think you are. So basically the goal, and I think I said it correctly there. And I think the big lesson to take from that is to always try and be even keeled. I mean, I could go on for an hour about Bob, what he meant to me, not just kind of in my career pursuit, but just like as a man and as like at the time, as a college student, in infinite impact. And, he's just the best, man. And I think that trying to keep an even keel, remember that you're never as good as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think I think you are. Keep an even keel always, I think, is one of the great lessons he taught me.
So Nick, some of the things we've been doing with other guests is asking them about some of the key characters they were with in college. You mentioned someone like Pat Reichart. Who were some of those other people that created that camaraderie that allowed everyone to thrive at FUV?
Oh, I mean, like we could kind of run down the list. Tom Winter's the guy that stands out as like an investigative reporter for NBC News now. Tom was great at Fordham. There are going to be names that kind of that maybe not be in the media now, like that don't necessarily do it anymore. But like Frank Mentasana is one of the funniest people of all time. He did play-by-play when we were at college together. Joe Bono is a year older than me. He was the sports manager when I was the assistant sports manager. I succeeded him. He was great. Two guys that are doing well in the media now. One guy I did an interview with last week on a CBS Sports radio show. I was a guest on it. Andrew Bogish is a great friend of mine. I was in Bogish's wedding. Mike Yam, the face of the Pac-12 network, is a great friend of mine. I mean, we can kind of run down the list here. I mean, there are so many great dudes that I went to school with, whether they were younger than me, my age, a little older than me, that the camaraderie at FUV was unlike anything else. And honestly, I think like the unifying factor was kind of like Bob. Like even if there were people that you didn't necessarily like, let's say, that you were with at FUV, and I feel like I pretty much liked everyone, but let's just say there were people you didn't like, you could all kind of unify in kind of your thoughts on the unbelievable character that was Bob Aarons. So, I mean, those are just some of the names that really stand out. It's just great dudes that I still keep in touch with today. And I'm sure, and I know for a fact I've forgotten some of them, but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of old now, so it kind of memories fade over time, and I've killed a lot of brain cells, but just great people at Fordham.
Nick, let's talk about gambling as a whole. I think every sports gambler can relate that they always remember some of their worst beats as a sports gambler. For me personally, it's Baylor -6.5 this year.
Against Kansas State?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had Kansas State in that game. That was a very lucky win. I knew exactly what you were talking about immediately. Yeah, that was this calendar year. Yeah,
it was. Any historically bad beats that stand out for you that you remember that hit personally for you?
Oh, there are two. So Duke and Utah played in the NCAA tournament in the second round. I think it was 2015. I think this was the year that Duke beat Wisconsin in the national title game. And I lost a lot of money on that because I had Wisconsin winning the whole thing and I would have won like a major office pool. So that was more like, that was more like bracket related. Mm-hmm. So Duke was, I want to say -5.5 against Utah in this game. It was like a late, Friday night game. It was like the late game on Friday night. I bet Utah +5.5. So the game ends, the clock's hit 0. Mike Krzyzewski, Larry Kostowiak walk out to midcourt, shake hands. The players literally walk into the tunnel. I win. I have Utah +5.5. They lose by 5. I win. The referees start huddling and they're about to go to commercial break and they're like, oh, well, something's happening here. They ruled I don't even remember what it was, a foul or they stepped out of bounds or something. They awarded Duke free throws after the game ended. They put the final score up. The players started walking off the court. And I think it was Trey Jones or Tyus Jones, whichever was the older Jones brother at Duke. And I think the younger brother was playing this past year. So whoever the older brother was who was drafted by the Timberwolves comes back onto the court to shoot 2 free throws, misses the first. So I'm still winning, makes the second. Game over. Duke wins by 6. I lose by a half point. I think if you Google this, Duke, Utah, NCAA tournament point swing, people lost a lot of money on that game. And I would remember just raging and being absolutely furious when that happened. So that was number one. The second one would be, this one requires less explanation because everyone will remember it. I had the Atlanta Falcons and the under for big money, Super Bowl 51 against the Patriots. Not only could the Falcons not cover the spread, but by allowing the Patriots to score a touchdown in overtime as opposed to holding them to a field goal, the game also went over the total. And I lost a lot of money on that. And that's probably the worst one. Falcons in the under in Super Bowl 51, obviously up 28-3, and they end up losing 34-28. You can't make this stuff up.
Nick, you mentioned the line between sports and maybe delving a little bit into the political side of things. And for instance, I saw you tweeted one time placing a bet on President Trump, and the replies flood in. In this environment on Twitter, it can get very divisive. What's your mindset on that, and how do you think people should kind of toe that line?
I feel like the betting market stuff, I always kind of preface my tweets with, this is not meant to be political. It's an analysis of the betting market, and people will still get angry because look, this is Twitter's a cesspool and people are looking to get angry about everything. So I feel like you can't really avoid it. And I generally feel like I do a pretty good job of trying to stay out of the fray. I just don't think there's any upside to kind of getting involved in like this on social media. What I would tell you guys is stay out of it as much as you can, because again, very little upside, because you're going to get attacked no matter what you say by different groups of people. Now, in the beginning of the pandemic, I felt like it was kind of tough and I feel like a lot of people probably experienced the same thing as me, where it was kind of this existential dread that I had, where now it feels okay, and for a while it's been okay, this is a crappy period now, but we'll be out of it at some point soon here. It's definitely not the end of the world. I'm still living a pretty happy life at the moment. But then it was wow, where's this going? How bad is this going to be? So I felt then it was really hard to kind of, for me at least, to kind of stay out of it. And my tweets were never politically tinged, but I was tweeting a lot of the time about coronavirus. And I was and I remember I got a tweet from this one guy who was a long-term Twitter follower of mine. And he was like, I have to unfollow you because you're so optimistic, but people are dying. And it kind of hit me there. And that was never my intention, was to be hey, people are dying, but sports are going to be back. And then it kind of hit me it's probably better off if I just keep my opinions on this kind of to myself. And kind of in the realm of my show now, we talked about this when we relaunched a couple of weeks ago, my producer and I, when we were in the thick of, all the protests in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. And it's do we want to address this stuff? Do we want to spend time talking about this on the show? And for me, it's, if it comes up, we kind of will give our thoughts on it. But I feel like we kind of work, and this is a Bobism as well, what we do in the sports media, we kind of work in like the toy department of life, right? Where people come to us, and sports are an escape from real life. Like, you have a day at work, you get to go home and, you know, put your feet up on the recliner, crack open a beer, and watch your favorite baseball team, your favorite basketball team. Like, it is just, I just got a text, by the way. I feel like my under bet's going to lose in this Everton-Leicester game that I'm not watching. Someone's pissed that they took the bet from me. Anyway, sports are an escape. So I try and treat it like that's what it is. And we're just trying to talk sports. We're trying to provide people a respite from regular life. So I try and stay out. Obviously, I have opinions on everything like everybody else does. I just feel like in the position that I'm in, like, A, who cares what I have to say about it? And B, it is a no-win situation to kind of broadcast your thoughts on social media, because there's always going to be someone that's going to be pissed off at you, no matter what you say.
Nick, you just mentioned betting on Everton, Leicester. I mean, so much of the sports betting now has come down to betting on the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, UFC, the Korean baseball organization. How has betting evolved for you with really no major sports back in session and adding golf to that equation too? How has the betting evolved for you, and how has this industry evolved for you over the past few months?
I don't know that the like industry has evolved or like my approach has evolved, but really I think the number one answer would honestly be like, I'm betting on golf now. And I'm like you've like Emmanuel, like if you talk to Pat, like this will sound like an arrogant comment. It's not meant to be. Like, I kind of like an encyclopedic deal with sports. I've been watching all of it my entire life, really with the exception of golf. Like golf, like I parachute in for like the Sunday of a major tournament, or I'll watch the Masters, but I had never really been into golf. Like even tennis, like I would watch obsessively, you know, growing up, but golf I was never really into. So I'm finding that now I'm really enjoying it, A, and B, like betting on it's really fun. It's like a 4-day event. So it's like 4 days of betting. It's really great. And there's all these different derivative markets and stuff. So I think the number one change for me, because I've always bet on soccer, and like I bet Korean baseball like the first night. And I remember staying up to watch it. It was like 2 a.m. on the East Coast. And I'm watching this Korean baseball game, and like they interviewed Eric Thames, like who used to play in Korea, for like an hour during one of these like marathon half innings. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I got to find something better to do than gamble on Korean baseball. So that was it for me with the Korean baseball. So I guess the number one thing has been, I kind of discovered like a new love for golf. And even when all the other sports come back, I think I'll still keep watching golf on a weekly basis and betting on it.
Nick, you said how back in 2012, which doesn't even seem that long ago, sports networks were only kind of dipping their feet into sports betting. And there's variance across the board as to which organizations go deeper into it, which ones don't. 10 years from now, where do you see sports betting in relation to sports media?
I think it's going to continue to grow here. And I actually, you know, I was very worried when the pandemic started, and, you know, still have some of those worries as well about how things are going to come back. Like I said, I'm optimistic. But when this first happened, I'm like, well, like this could be like a major, like not a death blow, but this could be a real like hit to our industry potentially. But as kind of things have progressed, I actually think, and this may sound like a crazy statement, but I genuinely believe it's true. I think that the space, the sports betting space, is going to come out of the pandemic stronger than it did going into the pandemic. And the reason is really simple. States are going to need money. States are going to need revenue. States have lost a lot of money. You know what an easy way to do that is? Legalize sports betting and legalize pot. Like those are two things that I think you're going to see a lot of states do, because they got to get the money flowing in. And like, I think that as sports betting continues to be accepted and continues to, you know, companies continue to kind of wade more into the sports betting waters, I see no reason why the space isn't going to continue to blow up. So like, I feel very good about the direction of the space right now. I think it's going to continue to grow.
Nick, just before we wrap things up, you mentioned obviously a lot of states needing that revenue. And one of the big questions I think going forward is, when is online sports gambling going to be legalized? Because obviously a lot of states have legalized betting in casinos and stuff, and betting on in-person sports books. But the future of online sports betting, where do you think that's heading? And do you think it's a similar direction as you mentioned for regular sports betting?
Eventually, I think it will be. I think that a lot of people and a lot of like people in charge of this are dumb and don't kind of understand it, that like, you know, what would really make this easy for people? If you could bet on your phone on a sporting event. And here's my honest answer. Like when PAPSA was repealed and it's like sports betting's now legal, I'm like sitting there thinking like, well, what have I been doing for the last decade plus? Like I've been gambling this whole time, so it's like it didn't even make none of this really makes a difference in my life because I've already been gambling anyway. But I think that they'll get their ducks in a row, and I think that like you just said, online mobile. If they're smart, and that may not be the case as we've seen recently, I think we'll see the proliferation of that just continue to grow.
Nick, one more for you. If you rewind to the middle of your FUV career, you're going on a bunch of road trips, have a bunch of road shows for one-on-one. What stands out at the top is like, hey, that was the real heyday of college?
Wow. I mean, there's really a lot of them, honestly. I think the best one was probably when we went to, it was Pat Reichart, myself, Frank Mentasana. There may have been one other person, like a kid that we went to school with who I'm forgetting, which is pretty bad, and Bob. And we drove to the New York State Broadcasting Awards. I don't even remember where it was, but it was a long drive. And Dan Rather presented us with the award, which was really cool. I have the picture somewhere of all of us with Dan Rather, which was great. And I remember that whole experience kind of being surreal because Bob kind of gave us like a really cool talk while we were driving there. Like, it's like, wow, like, you guys accomplished something really cool here. And that was our senior year. And it was kind of like a reflection on like everything we had done, for me at least, like in my college career. And it had culminated in this moment. And I'm a huge Giants fan growing up. And we won this award and we beat all these stations. And it was Eli Manning getting like, and I wanted the Giants to draft Eli. So like, it was really cool. And then we pulled into a McDonald's. And Bob was trying to order. I don't even remember what it was. It doesn't matter. But Bob was trying to make an order at McDonald's, and like the guy didn't like understand him, or like there was a problem with like the comm thing or whatever. And Bob was just screaming at like this inanimate object, his order, like over and over again. Like, and I'm not going to do the Bob, and I'm not going to yell, but he was like screaming, "Number 5, a number 5, a number 5," over and over again until again, like this inanimate object was just not answering him back. And Frank, Pat, and I are like pissing ourselves laughing in the back seat and in the front seat of the car. So I think that one really stands out, going to accept the New York State Broadcasting Award and Bob flipping out on a McDonald's drive-thru. Excuse my language.
That's an amazing way to leave it off. Nick, we appreciate you taking all the time today. Great insight, and we'll talk soon.
Great, guys. You guys continue to kill it. And to all the kids at WFUV, keep crushing it. And really appreciate you guys having me.